Hey everyone, Cursed Deck Builder here, making our way to 10,000 decks assisted, and here we are looking at Tatyova Mill, a traditionally landfall deck that has been turned into a mill deck. I won't lie, this got my attention. This deck comes to us from Cam, who says, what needs improvement? Everything. This is a Tatyova landfall mill deck. That I did figure out, I will say. But absolutely, we've got a lot we can improve, so I'll do a very nice general overview. And they say they prefer budget options. I think everything I've suggested is at a budget. We'll have to see. Before we get into it, I thought I'd mention again the idea I had in my previous video, where I wanted to gauge interest if people would be interested in seeing me play some commander decks on MTGO. Probably kind of challenge decks where we try to win a commander game with a silly challenge or a fun commander. Let me know. If it doesn't get anyone's ideas, I might still do it. I think it's fun, but we'll have to see. It's different from my regular content, and YouTube really doesn't like that, so I want to check in before I make any changes. But let's get right into it. If you'd like to take a look at the deck list we're talking about today, or if you'd like to submit your own deck list to me so that I can make a video assisting your deck, please check the video description down below. So who is Tatyova, Benthic Druid, and why are they the head of our mill landfall deck? Well, I feel like Tatyova requires no introduction, but we'll give one anyways. 5 mana, blue-green merfolk druid, 3/3, landfall. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life and draw a card. This is a creature that's in my cube, for example, but like mainstay of, land decks in Simic for forever, I think. I think they're one of the most popular commanders, to be honest. Just a very, very good commander. And what I like here is we're trying something new with them. I think, landfall decks can be very, very straightforward. And so instead, we're using them as a kind of mana engine, a card engine in a deck built on mill. Now we have a lot of interesting aspects of mill here, some strategies that I think are stronger than others. So before we get any further, let's talk mill in Commander. So mill exists a little like burn. Especially in formats I play like Modern, we kind of tend to compare them a lot. They are decks that just go face, if you were, and they don't really want to interact too much. They just want to burn opponents out of the game and knock them all out. Now, both Mill and Burn have kind of a hard time jumping in Commander, because for Burn, for both of these strategies actually, not only does the number of opponents go up, the quantity that you're trying to hit goes up too. Burn goes from 10 to 40, which is 4 times more, and then Mill goes from 60, let's say 50, from 50 to about 90, which is just under double, either way you cut it. Then you multiply each by 3, and we get a bit of a problem. A lot of the mill and burn cards that we really like in other formats are just not as effective. So here, what we're trying to do instead is take, and this is true for burn too, we want to take advantage of permanent and triggered based burn and mill to get the most amount of triggers possible. And which the first two, which I think are kind of the namesakes of the idea, or maybe not namesakes, but the core of the idea, are Hedron Crab and Ruin Crab. Both landfall creatures that mill our opponents, especially Ruin Crab that mills all of our opponents in a landfall deck. This is the combination of ideas. So before we go through others and see what catches my eye, we're going to go down and see our curve. Now our curve is a little tricky. We're very, very high on 2 mana and 3 mana, and since we're on a general thing, I'm going to take a look at these cards the most. I think the rest of the deck is pretty straightforward. Omniscience is our 10 mana card, and I think it's very, very good here as our final payoff, because Omniscience, with all the card draw we get from our commander and a few other card draws here and there, allows us to like burn through our deck and immediately mill out our opponents. So I think it's very well placed here. And our 7 mana cards are Teresian Mindbreaker and Fleet Swallower. 2 cards I'll actually talk about here while we're here. So both of these cards do kind of the same thing. Granted, no, this is Unearth, it's not the other way. I always think this is the prototype, but it's not. Both of these cards, that when they attack, they mill a player half of their deck. Now, I believe the only difference is the Mindbreaker mills the person you attack, whereas the Fleet Swallower you can mill anyone, so you can attack one player and mill another, which is, in my mind, a little stronger, though obviously the Mindbreaker is easier to cast. The thing about these cards is they're kind of tricky. Now, one thing for the Mindbreaker is it has Unearthed, which will give it haste, so you can kind of guarantee that first attack, especially at 4 mana, but both of them have to be played and kind of have to sit out there, and after which you're only going to attack a single player. These are also in a mill deck cards that lose strength over the game, if that makes sense, because when we're doing a halve, right, we're at first it's, if someone didn't ever draw cards, let's say it's 50, and then when you've milled them 40, it then is 30, and so on. Like, it goes down the further we go down, and the value of this attack gets worse and worse. Now, the first attack is really, really strong, but considering it's a 7 mana creature without haste and no protection, that first attack is pretty hard to do. So me, personally, I'm not at all interested in these cards. I'm pretty happy to toss them out. All right, I will talk about lands for a second before we go in, because I think it's just the easiest thing to talk about. We're playing 19 non-basics, and that feels excessive. I think we can definitely play a bunch of other non-basics. Notably, it feels like we're not playing... Are we? There's Simic Growth Chamber. So we're playing one bounce land, but there's also the colorless bounce land, and there's a few others in monocolor that are bounce lands. I can't remember what they're called now. I think one of them is a fairy card, but they bounce, like the blue one, I know it bounces a card and it taps for a colorless and a blue. Works basically the same as the bounce lands, but those are very, very good in landfall decks, and I recommend you play them all. But after that, I think you should play basically every tap land you can. You said you're on a budget. We can accommodate that budget, right? Find every land that's blue and green comes in tapped, start there. After which, try to grab, you know, the pain lands, try to grab the blue-green fast land, I'm pretty sure it's cheap, try to get the blue-green slow land, so on and so forth, and build your land like landfall like that. Sorry, your land base. With 39 lands, I think that's fine for Commander in a land deck, and I think you should maybe consider one MDFC, which would probably be the clone one in blue that everyone plays. That's a land on the back. But otherwise, that's all I want to say about lands. So let's go and let's look at the 3 and 2 drops, especially the 3 drop, which I feel is kind of high. I gotta go back and do one more thing. We gotta talk about Jaces real fast because they are a whole cycle. I can tell that the Jaces are probably here for flavor, and I would keep some of them, but I would not keep all of them. I think the one I want to keep is Jace, Wielder of Mysteries, and maybe Memory Adept. Memory Adept comes in with a target player mills 10 cards, which can add up very quickly. It's the same mana cost as our Commander, but it's something, so I don't think it's the worst. I would cut it, but I mean, if I'm cutting all the Jaces, I want to leave you with at least 2. Actually, I'm going to give you a Jace, so yeah, don't play that one. Wielder of Mysteries obviously has a lot of mill in it. It has a goal where you can mill yourself to win the game, which is actually really, really interesting. And also with the static of that, I think this is probably the best one you can play. But otherwise, a lot of the Jaces, they kind of mill too little. And I know that's weird to say, so I don't generally like them. Though Jace Berlin, sorry, I did this in the previous video I talked about Jace. Bellerin, I think is worth casting and using with your Sphinxes and Teferis tutelage, which work really well in Psychic Corrosion, so I would keep that one as well. The rest I think are a little more clunky and I would probably cut them. Yeah. Yeah, that's how I'll leave it. Also, Jace Memory Adept, I think it's worth considering that milling 10 is not as much as you think. It's only 10%. So in comparison, if this was 1v1, Jace would mill 6. That's 10% of 60. And you wouldn't play him if he milled 6. So for the same reason, I don't think you should play this one. Okay, I've gone far enough past it. Let's talk about 3 and 2 drops. Jace Bellerin, I think we should keep, but it's close. A lot of these are generally good. Labman, I feel like you have Thassa's Oracle and 4-mana Jace. I don't think you need Lab Mana as well. I think that's pushing it for another card that just doesn't do anything. Elvish Rejuvenator, I think I would play this after playing like Steve, like Sakura Tribe Elder, and then even after that playing the blue-green snake elf shaman. Oh, I always forget what that is. Enters the battlefield, reveals a top card, draw a card, or if it's a land, put it on the battlefield. I think I would start there. I think at 3 mana it's a little much, and it's not even like if it was one of the 3 mana elves that, you know, guarantee a forced into play, I might be a little like Farhaven Elf. I might be a little easier on it, but Elvish Rejuvenator isn't even a guarantee, and I think that's what makes it particularly weak. So that's an easy cut. Radumap, Excavator, and Spellseeker. I think Spellseeker is a bit too pointed for this deck. I think it's a very, very strong card, but I just don't think you have a single card in instants and sorceries you really want under 2 mana. Increasing Confusion and Prosperity are very, very good when you are going off, but the rest of them are kind of just okay. Like, I think Madding Cacophony, also, I noticed this and I love these 2 cards back to back, Flood of Recollection and Madding Cacophony. Jason's having a hard time, he's having a lot of headaches. But Madding Cacophony here mills 8 times 3, 24, and it's even not that good. Maybe with Kicker it's better, but I don't want to tutor for it. And then looking at instants, I guess Cyclonic Rift. I just don't think Spellseeker is a very good card, and I think it would be better in a Spell Slinger kind of deck, or with higher value targets. Here, it's just kind of okay. Titania feels like a backup win condition. It really doesn't feel like a card that belongs in this deck. So, I mean, it's clear that you want to meld them. Both pieces are in here, but I personally would take them out. They're just not on the game plan you want to do, so they kind of stick out as not being very strong. Kodama's Reach, Tasha's Hideous Laughter, Windfall, these are all good. Entish Restoration. Are we playing their 2 mana Rampant Growth, Farseek, Summerbloom? I guess it's fine. I'm not going to be too hard on it. All of the enchantments are good. We're going to come back to the enchantments. That's probably, I think, the most powerful part of the deck. Okay, and let's like quickly look at the 2 drops, if there's anything I can cut out. Even more Jaces, but I do like Jace Vern's Prodigy. Triskai Decaphile, also, I think maybe this is a pet card. This doesn't really belong here. I get with enough mana, you can just sink a bunch of mana into her and just, or them, and no, her, and just draw a bunch of cards to work with your enchantments, but I don't really think that's what you want to do. This is just a card that doesn't help you. Easy, easy cut. Simone is a fine card, but I think just a little too weak here. I think she's she's a good card, but I think better in a more dedicated kind of, I don't know, a different kind of ramp deck. This just feels just a little too cute. Not terrible, but just not very impressive. Flood of Recollection, honestly, I don't think you should play this. This is one of those cards that just functions as a draw card. Blue to draw a card, right? And in a deck that's like, this is a deck that has, like Burn, you have so many different cards that do the same thing. You tend to want quantity and not quality. Like, you'd rather draw several cards than draw one specific card from your graveyard. The fact that you exile it, the fact that you might mill this, I think generally makes me less impressed with it, and I don't think I would play that. Cyclonic Rift's great, Growth Spiler's great. Sorry, I jumped over these because they're all good, so don't worry about them. Arcane Signet and Simic Signet, I feel like Simic Signet might be a bit unnecessary. You have a lot of ramp. I think you're okay. But Arcane Signet, I think, is fine. Mesmeric Orb is very, very good. Druid class. Is this the best way to get this ability? Because you're putting it to 2 and you're leaving it there, right? You don't really care about level 4, so 5 mana, play an additional land on each of your turns. I don't think I would play this. I think with Azusa in here, I think with Summer Bloom, I think you have much better versions of this card to begin with, so I don't think you need this. This is just so clunky. And yes, it gains you life, but I don't really think that matters so much here. And Jace's Eraser is great. Okay. Anything else that pops out to me that I think should come out? Ashaya is very weird. I do understand it allows you to get a lot of extra landfall by playing creatures, but I don't think you have a combo that just puts in a bunch of creatures all at once, outside of like Omniscience and just playing the creatures. So I don't think she's pretty good here. It does allow you to tap your creatures for mana, but even then, I'm not sure if I like it. So I think Ashaya is easy to cut. I do really like Spark Double. I think that's very fun. Deep Glow Skate feels here to double one of your your planeswalkers to ultimate, and I just don't think outside of Jace Memory Adept, you really, I guess Jace Wielder of Mysteries, but I just don't think that's worth it. I don't think you're not playing anything that otherwise can really benefit, as far as I can tell, from the number of counters on it. So I think this is just kind of clumsy here. The ceiling is high, but the floor is very low, and I just don't think it belongs here, so I think this is an easy cut. And Mindbreaker we've already talked about. Anything else? This is really good here. I really like this here. I'm a big fan in this card, in this deck. No, I think this is fine. I'm not gonna be too hard on it. Okay. Let's talk about these enchantments, because this is what I've been waiting to talk about, and a large portion of my additions are going to come from it. Here's the idea. The idea is this. Of all of your targeted, mill, let's say, for example, Madding Cacophony, right? This is mill 24. Even that's not a great one. Let's just talk Hedron Crab and Ruin Crab. So the thing that makes these two cards really good, especially Ruin Crab, is that it's constant, it's not spending a card, and it stays on the battlefield. Your enchantments are the best part of it. I think you already know this, but these are the best parts. Now, the best one is Psychic Corrosion, but the rest are pretty good. A lot of them target only one player. Jace's Erasure is 1-for-1. Memory Erosion is another one that targets everyone. We'll come back to that. Let's see. Sphinx's Tutelage is target opponent mills 2. Teferi's Tutelage is target opponent mills 2. The Sphinx is a little better because it both can trigger itself like Teferi's Tutelage, but if they have the same color, it happens again, which is really cool. But all of these are just very strong. I do think, so Memory Erosion, which is whenever an opponent casts a spell, they mill 2, and Psychic Corrosion are the strongest. Now, Memory Erosion, it depends who you play again, but Psychic Corrosion is very easily just so strong. Every time you draw a card, each opponent mills 2. You don't need to be explained how Prosperity and Psychic Corrosion just combo each other really well. So one of the things I want to do, and we're going to go into additions in a second, is I want to push into this strategy. Now, you could be playing tutors, but we're trying to keep the price low. We're trying to keep budget options open, but it is something worth considering that we can find ways to dig these enchantments out, and if you can, I would. But right now, I think it's a very strong direction to go into, one you're clearly already thinking about. I had forgotten about the Leyline. That's the last thing I'll say before additions. Leyline is just particularly bad here. You don't play any differently when you are playing on opponent's turns. The only difference is that you want to, I guess, time your spells better, but your enchantments, which I continue to think are the strongest spells, they just are much better when you cast them as soon as possible. And obviously, to tie us back to Tatyova, I think the goal of this deck is to get these whenever you draw a card enchantments out, have Tatyova out, and start playing lands and drawing cards, right? So let's go into additions. Let's see what I'm talking about. Okay, more enchantments. We're starting with the enchantments because I think this is the core of the deck. Fraying Sanity only targets one opponent, but I think it's absolutely worth playing because it mills your opponents on every end step for every card went in the graveyard each turn. So Fraying Sanity is really good on your turns when you're doing a lot of milling, but even better when you just have other abilities that draw you cards that get you further into your deck on other players' decks, or other abilities that put lands on your opponent's turns, whatever. Your opponents interacting with each other will trigger Fraying Sanity. So this is a very, very efficient card at 3 mana to just enchant someone and leave it on. The next one, this one's a little different, but I really, really like it here, and I think it's very good, is Rites of Flourishing. Rites of Flourishing increases everyone's draw and every land they can play. And generally, you don't mind this because you are kind of, it's a group hug card that like just empties their deck faster. Like you can consider it milling a card every turn, but getting that additional land for you and your opponents to an extent, but mainly you, is just so big in this deck, right? It's just more triggers, more Tatyova triggers, and it's much better than like Druid class. Okay, here are the 2 main ones. Court of Cunning, which you were considering, and I think you should absolutely get it. Upkeep, you mill all your opponents for 2, but if you are the Monarch, each of those players mill 10 instead. Now, getting the Monarch is a little tough, and keeping it, but you can use your creatures, you can use some tokens, you can use some bounce. It's a little tricky, but you can do it, and if you can get to your turn, milling your opponents all 10, I think it's very, very good. But the one that's even better, and this is going to transition to our last few enchantments to add, is Court of Vantress. Court of Vantress enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch, same thing. The difference is this one is regularly on upkeep. Court of Vantress becomes a copy of an enchantment, and if with this ability, but if you're the Monarch, you get straight up a token copy of that enchantment. And you use this on any other of your enchantments. The fun ones, obviously, is what you can do is you can use it like on Court of Cunning, and then, oh no, only if you make a copy, because it won't make you the Monarch unless you make a copy. So instead, you can use it on like any of your other cards, Rites of Flourishing, you can use it on Fraying Sanity, you can use it on Psychic Corrosion, which is a really good one, and just start making extra copies of these enchantments that are very strong. Especially, like, you know, even things like, what was it, the Sphinx's Tutelage, where you're just increasing the chances of just constantly milling, constantly milling. But that made me think we should have a few more of these abilities. So Copy Enchantment just got reprinted, 40 cents. Very, very easy, come into play. Copy one of your enchantments, get another version of that ability. Mirror Maid does the same thing, costs a little more because it also works for artifacts, but a very, very strong ability. So that was the main way I was thinking about this deck. What's interesting is these cards don't like naturally trigger with landfall, so they feel kind of weird adding them to the deck, but because the cards you're copying trigger off of card draw, and Tatyova is like the queen of drawing cards, you're gonna get just doubling and doubling your triggers, whereas at the same time, both of these, I think even this one, yeah, all of these target your opponent's stuff too. So if you have an opponent that has, for example, Smothering Tide, Mystic Study, Necropotence, these kind of really powerful enchantments, you can make copies of them and you can take advantage of them as well, which I think makes the floor on these cards very, very high. And I do very much like that. All right, what else did I say? Another one that caught my eye is Dreamborn Muse. This is a card that I don't know if I like, because it does mill you as well. If you're leaning more into the Thassa's Oracle, Jace, you know, kind of plan, this can be very, very good. But this card represents milling your opponents like 5 to 7 on their upkeep, and I think that's pretty good. It is a bit clumsy at times, and it can be dangerous to you, but I still think it's worth considering. The Jace that I'm surprised you're not playing is Jace the Perfected Mind. This is our completed Jace. Namely, we'd want to play it for -2. This is very good because certain cards, back in the day, a lot of mill cards would check, like, is their library half empty or whatever. This one just says, is there 20 or more cards in a graveyard? Which is really, really easy to trigger from you. So this is -2, draw 3, and mill 3, draw 3, and I think that's very, very good in your deck. So I do really like it. Obviously, if you can build Jace up very high, like if you're just, you know, just plussing him for any reason, you can get him to mill 3 times X is very good. But realistically, I don't see you doing that. Just keep using the -2, just keep drawing, get as far as you can, just keep casting your spells. I think you're going to be very, very happy. Then the last few cards I wanted to suggest was a few kind of staples that I think you should be playing if you can. Beast Within, just a very, very good card, just takes care of any permanent. It's nice to have some targeted removal, and this is very good. Likewise, Nature's Claim is very, very strong. Just targets almost anything and immediately remove it. Now, 4 life doesn't really mean anything in Commander, but especially when you're in mill, you don't care about it, and I do very much so like that. Then here, I wanted to suggest also Rapid Hybridization and Pongify. Now, Pongify has gotten a little expensive, so I know you had budget concerns. I will say this one is cheaper, but they are the best removal spells in your colors. Just target, destroy something, make it into something else. You'll be very, very happy. After that, we have Fog. I think Fog is just a very good card that I was actually going to suggest this. I have to remember to write it in the comments of the 6th Doctor deck. For the same reasons I like Fog here, your deck is very, not very high on defense, so having an occasional card where you can just, or 2 in your case, that you can just Fog and just avoid a combat can be very, very good. And though that is technically the end of my suggestions, I would like to add, there are a few cards that I think I forgot, if I can spell Predation. Azuri's Predation, noteworthy, is a board wipe in your colors where you create a ton of 4/4s to attack all your opponent's creatures and you keep the rest. It's just been reprinted recently, very, very strong. The other one is Oversimplify, which I also think is also very cheap and I think is very, very good, especially because I believe you have an easier time with a single big creature than multiple small ones. So I think this is very good here. And then if you really wanted to go further, Curse of Swine could also be there because you have the mana to do it, but I find this weaker. I'd rather the first two, honestly, especially Oversimplify, I think is very, very good here. And I think that'll help a lot to give you a little more board control in this deck. Full screen again. And I think you'll be much, much happier with this. I think the deck is pretty good. I don't have much more to say. I think there's, I've noted some cards that I think just don't belong. And if we cut down on the Jaces, we'll have a few more options. I think I would start with the cards like the removal and the board clears will probably help the deck the most. After that, the extra enchantments. And even if you're buying, even if you're spending like 10 bucks, a month on this deck, you should be able to pick up a lot of those cards very quickly and be pretty happy with the results. I think the deck idea is really, really cool. I'm almost tempted to wonder what a Sultai version of the same kind of blend of cards, maybe using Dina and Simone as their commanders, Landfall Mill. I wonder what that would look like, but right now this version of the deck I think is very, very strong. And I'm interested to hear what you think. If you do send me another one, send me a little more ideas, because this was a very general look. So if you think of anything specific you're worried about, or what your play group's like, or what level of strength you want it to be, that helps a lot with helping me give suggestions and finding out exactly what we can do to improve the deck. So hope this was helpful, and good luck. Thank you so much for watching. This video is brought to you by viewers like you and people on my Patreon. If you'd like to send me another draft of this deck, or any deck, there is a link in the video description down below. And if you'd like to make your deck one of my donation decks I work on, there's a link there too. Finally, if you'd like to like, comment, subscribe, I would be very appreciative. It helps the channel quite a bit. Thank you and good luck in brewing and building.